Hey everyone, and welcome to another devlog video for the NPC Manager system. I wanted to make this short video to show you guys what I've been working on for the past few days. If you guys have been on Discord, you've seen that I've been posting some screenshots and comments, and I'm actually on the final stages to getting this asset ready for submission to Epic Games. That's really great because that means that I'm going through all of the code, making sure that everything is commented, that all of this additional nodes that were not connected, that were there, like print strings and things like that for testing, all of that stuff has been cleaned up, and that itself takes a lot of time. But I've also found some bugs and some improvements that I can make this really flexible. That's one of the benefits of trying to set up all these showcase scenes and things like that. It forces me to set up things the way you would do it in your own game, right? So anyway, I have a few things that I wanted to show you guys today. The first thing is actually super simple. It is the ability to add a random name to your NPC from a data table. And if you guys recall, a few weeks back, I showed this road scene where there's a bunch of NPCs walking around, and I had to manually go in there and change the NPC name one by one. So if I select one NPC here, and I go to the controller, under the general settings, you have an NPC name, and you can put whatever you want there. And that name is going to then, on begin play, be added here and replace NPC name. That's basically it. Uh, if you have hundreds of NPCs, like a crowd, I think I had like 40 or 50, I had to manually go in there and put a name and have to think of a name. Um, and that was really annoying. So as I was preparing the road scene for submission to Epic, I was like, well, I don't want to go ahead and do this again. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just pull this from a data table? And then I can just go online and get, these websites that have a bunch of random names. And that's exactly what I did. It's super simple, but I think it kind of adds a lot to it, right? So I have two different data tables, one for male names and one for female names. And if I just open this guy right here, I think it's like the top 100 popular names in the US for males, and I did the same thing for females. All it is literally just one column called name, and the same thing is going to be there for female, obviously. So that's pretty much it. So now you have the option of picking a random name. By default, it's off, right? You put whatever name you want. But if you want this to pick from the list, this is a Google Docs Excel that you can just add and remove, and then it's very easy to update. And all you do is you select this and pick the actual data table. So obviously for females, you'll pick the female names data table, and for males, you'll pick the male names data table. And that is pretty much it. So if I click play here, you'll see that they have different names, Donald and Lawrence, and you have Roger and Peter, and it just literally picks a random name. There is no logic to for unique names. So obviously by chance these two guys could be the exact same name. But the function is there. If somehow you would want it to make this more complex, you could probably go into the code and then just add your own logic there. Very simple, but I thought it was very useful. And again, if you're making a crowd and you're just trying to give random names to people, this would be a great way of doing that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is general improvements to the dialogue system. And I'm going to show you guys I'll show you the road scene in a second here. But I found that sometimes, for whatever reason, and obviously that was a bug, an NPC could start a conversation with another NPC that was already in a convo, and you would have like these three-way conversations, and then one NPC would just be kind of stuck there in limbo, talking to himself. So obviously I had to go through the code and step through all of that social code and tidy it up and include some bug fixes, and now I feel like it's way more rock solid. So you could have hundreds of NPCs and they're all trying to talk to each other, and now that connection, they can only talk two at a time, and once an interaction is initiated, no other NPCs will be able to start that. So that clears up a lot of issues that I was having before. And then the next step was, well, is there a way to limit the NPCs to talk to each other, right? Maybe you want certain NPCs to only be able to talk to other certain NPCs. And then I had the idea of adding tags, and this is very similar to the Animal Behavior Kit engage tags. If you guys have ABK, you've known that you can limit the interaction between animals by just having a list of tags. And this is the exact same idea that I've put here. So for example, for NPC test 1, if I go under the social, you'll see that now we have an array called interaction tag list. And by default, they all come with the tag NPC, but you can add as many as you want. So NPC and test, and then for test 2, what I did is I removed NPC and just add test. And basically, 2 NPCs will be able to interact if they have at least one tag in common on their list. So you could have tags be literally anything, the name of a town, the gender, the name of a family, whatever. And if no common tags are found, then the NPCs will not interact with each other. So that's a really neat way of kind of segmenting your crowds. And you can see here that if I click play, you'll see this in a second. NPC 1, which I think is Carl, has both tags, but NPC 2 only has
How
test.
are you?
And
I've
you
been
can see
better.
that because they have one common tag.
How is
they're
your
actually
family
able to
doing?
interact.
They're all doing fine.
Good to hear.
Goodbye.
Bye then. Notice now that this is another improvement that I've made, is that now I'm not restricting when they can have a conversation.
How's everything?
I'm gonna stop it right there. But before, I was only allowing them to have this dynamic dialogue when they're roaming in a volume, which is the example that I've always used here. And that's because when you're following a path, there's a specific timing and there's the routine and things like that. And I was gonna just ship it like this, but then I thought, you know what? This is going to be a very highly requested feature. You have NPCs traveling around or following a path. You want these dynamic conversations to happen anyway, right? So then I went back and I said, you know what? Instead of having this as a future update, I'm just gonna go ahead and spend a couple of hours and try to do it now. And I did, and I still have to test, but the goal is going to be that the NPCs will be able to interact when they're following a path. And what you saw there is that now that I have the pause routine implemented, then they actually pause their routine and then they resume their routine. And my goal is to have pretty much everything except where they're already interrupted or at a station for these conversations to be able to happen. So that's really, really cool. And maybe you assume that's the way it was, but there was a hard limit before, and now it should work just as you imagine. It doesn't really matter what they're doing on their profile. If they get close, they have a chance to interact. So that is really, really neat. The other really big thing is sound. And for this, I'm going to move to the showcase level and show you guys what's happening here. So even before this, I think I've shown you guys, if you go to a station, you'll have some sound options. So if you go to like the regular animations here for this guy, you have obviously the loop animations, the intro, the outro, but you also have sound clips. And if you go down here, you can actually add a sound clip and a bunch of other information like volume, pitch, start time, attenuation, whatever. Before the change, what was happening was as soon as the loop animation would start, the sound clip would play. And then it would just play, and then it would play again every single time the loop would start. But the issue with that is that sometimes a loop would have the NPC do something several times. So the loop for this guy hammering was like 3 times hammering. So that means that then I had to author my sound to have the same timing as the hammer hitting the table, and the sound effect would have to be done with 3 different hammer hits, because obviously you're trying to match it. That works, but it gets annoying for obvious reasons, right? So what if the timing is a little different, or you want to change your loop to, instead of having 3 hammers, have 2 hammers, or you want to change the play rate or whatever, right? Then you would have to go back and change the physical sound file, which is really, really annoying and not really the ideal way of doing things. So now I have done it in a much better way, in my opinion. Now I do it with animation notifies. And if I go here to the animation from this guy, let's go to the animations, oops, right here. And I open this guy, you'll see, I'm gonna stop him right here, that what I've done is I've added animation notifies when there should be a sound. So basically every time the hammer goes down, you would want the sound to play. So right here there's a sound, right here there's a sound, right here there's a sound. And you can see that it's looping 3 times, and this is going to continue to loop. So every time it hits down, you add the sound. So actually Unreal already has a notify for playing sound. So if I click here and let's say add notify, by default the engine has things like play sound and play particle effect. So I could just go ahead and say play sound and be done, right? So what's the problem? The problem is that you would then have to add the sound to the specific animation. So you don't have the ability to have an array, and the animation would only be stuck to one sound instead of a random sound from an array. So that's one thing. But to me the most important thing was that this doesn't have attenuation, meaning that it plays here and it sounds like a 2D sound. You could hear it from really, really far away, as opposed to having like a radius, like the conversation. If you're far from 2 NPCs talking, then you're not going to hear it. You're only going to hear it when you get close. Now think about having dozens of NPCs with different jobs and stations, and they all have this sound. It's just going to sound terrible. You only want to hear the sound when you get close. So this option again wasn't good. So I moved to a hybrid system where I have a specific notify. Notice that it's NPCM underscore station sound. And then on the actual blueprint here, I have code that's already on the animation blueprint that is triggered when the station sound is done. And then basically, instead of calling this event as soon as the animation starts on a loop, you call it explicitly only when you have this notify. And what that does is that now you can author the sound to be exactly what you would expect. If it's a hit for a hammer, you just include 1 hit, and then this would scale with the animation. No matter how many hits per loop or whether you change the play rate, it will only play the sound when it appears here as a notify on the animation. So hopefully that's not too convoluted, but the point is this is way, way better. And of course it has attenuation as well. You can see here that the sound that is returned has a bunch of cool things. So attenuation, pitch, volume. So you can change all those parameters on the actual station. You can see here, all of these things are then passed via the animation notify back to the controller, and then you have all of those settings done. And you probably saw it here. And I did the same thing for station action. So remember I showed this last time. This is the station that is pressing a button. Whoops. And when the button is pressed, this little thing is going to be activated, the platform, and they're going to go up and down. Before, what I showed on the video was that there was a delay in the action. So you say use interaction, and then actor list, interact with the simple platform, and there was a float value here adding a delay. And it's exactly the same thing. You would have to time the delay with the animation to say, hey, this animation takes about 3 seconds to press the button, and then only after 3 seconds go ahead and activate it. That doesn't make sense. If you have several different animations with different timings, you wouldn't be able to do that. So instead, I moved it to the same thing, and now it's driven by animation notify. So a lot of talk, but what does that mean? Let me just show you in just a second here, and I'll be quiet. As you can see, I'm talking a little bit here. As you can see, now there is attenuation, which means that the sound will only be heard by a specific distance. And you can specify the distance by putting a specific file asset to each individual animation. So if you wanted this sound to be heard from really far away, you can do that. or if you want it to be really tiny, where it only can be heard when the NPC gets close, when the player gets close, then you can do that as well. And also the same thing here for the action. Now the action is triggered with the animation only when the animation notify is done. And you can see here that is exactly what happens. So if I had an array of animations for action, each animation would have a separate anim notify, which means that the timing would still work for the button. So again, huge improvement in the workflow, and to me makes perfect sense. That's the way you would do it. But when you're coding it at the beginning, sometimes you just do it, in the fastest way possible.
I've been better.
And you've seen this before.
How is your family doing?
Son got the flu last week.
I am sorry to hear. I hope he gets better soon.
I'll see you around.
Bye then. I've also decided to add a little sound, so hopefully it's not too loud. Got some of those open source sounds, so I got this explosion. Did you see that explosion?
Yes, my house is gone.
What are we going to do now?
Let's ask my brother for help. Maybe we can stay in his house for now.
Good idea.
Let's go.
There you go. So hopefully you can see why I'm so excited about this. Sound is hugely important when your stations have things that are like working. So I'm really happy with the new implementation of sound. Also the action again makes perfect sense. Now that I think about it, it just makes sense that that's the way it would work. But before I was using delays and things like that. So this is really big as far as usability. And you can see if I look at the animation for press sound, you can see that I have two notifies, one called animation station action and one for the sound. So I actually have a little sound that plays when the button is pressed, and then immediately after that, a few frames later, then the action is triggered. So this is a way easier workflow, and all you have to do is add those specific notifies, which of course I'm going to go over on the tutorial so you will know exactly how to do it. And I've added some additional sounds like this explosion. And now if I go to the road scene, I've also added a little ambient sound here that I found online. So if I click play, you can hear there's like a little crowd. Look at all these NPCs, all have random names from the data tables.
I've been better. How's your family doing?
How is everyone?
Son got the flu last week. I'm sorry to hear.
I am sorry to hear. I hope he gets better soon.
Doing great.
Goodbye. How's your family doing? Bye then.
Bye
See
then.
you.
Son got the flu last week.
How's everything? Hope he gets better soon. I've been better.
Goodbye.
How is everyone?
How's
Son got the
everything?
flu last week. I've been I'm sorry to hear.
How are you?
Been better.
I'm fine.
How is everyone?
How is everything?
They're all doing fine. I've been better.
Son got
Good
the
to
flu
hear.
last week. How's your family doing?
I'll see you around. Son got the flu last week.
Then.
I'm sorry to hear. I hope he gets better soon. Good to hear.
All right. So hopefully you can see why sound is so important. Just by adding a very simple blueprint with a static sound of a crowd, and then having stations like this have sound as you get close, and then having the NPCs have correct dialogue as you're going through the crowd, and having that be solid so there's no bugs of random NPCs interrupting. You can really create a very nice environment with your crowds. And obviously all of this stuff works with the proximity system, and you have these spline crowds that you can control how many you have. So you really do have a lot of control on creating a very nice looking scene where you can create like a nice little city scene or road scene where your NPCs are kind of populating your world and making it feel really alive. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Sound massively improved, actions very nicely improved, and then the simple things like the tags for the dialogue gives you control, and then getting random names from a data table, which again, if you're trying to create random NPCs, is quite useful. I am very close to submitting this to Epic. But as I am going through all of the process of cleaning, renaming variables, going through all of the code, I found that I've been able to fix several bugs and making this way more streamlined. So hopefully you see the potential, and I will make a video once it's submitted. And it's still gonna take a few weeks for Epic to approve, but in the meantime, I'll be making tutorials and things like that. So I would love to hear your comments and your suggestions. Do you think that this is good, what I've added? Do you have any other suggestions? Any comments are welcome. Please leave them in the section below. Or if you haven't joined Discord, come to Discord. I am pretty active there. I can post, I usually post the pictures of what I'm working on late at night, and I post questions, and a lot of suggestions come from there. So if you like to, go ahead and join us, and yeah, hopefully you like where this is going. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.